Hi, and welcome to Dark Window. I'm your host, Jim Mann. Here on this program, I will be talking with many of the leading investigators, researchers, and authors on the topics of UFOs, UAPs, alien abductions, extraterrestrials, and a host of many other fascinating and related topics. So please join me and my guest for the next hour as we reach out. This is Dark Window on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. And hello, everyone, and welcome to Dark Window. I'm your host, Jim Mann, and with me tonight here in the studio is a very special guest, Nancy Rynes.
Howdy.
Nancy is an inspirational, did I say that right, Nancy? Rynes?
You did.
Okay. Now, Nancy is an inspirational speaker. She's an artist. She's a scientist, and she's an author of at least 3 books. Maybe you've got more. But one book, Awakenings from the Light, Messages from Heaven, and Walking in the Light. Now, these books are there. They're detailing the lessons that she learned by 2 near-death experiences. Nancy refers to herself as a spiritual explorer, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Nancy, you've been featured on NBC's Today Show, on the Netflix series Surviving Death. Nancy is a popular keynote speaker at conferences and radio programs across the country. And she actually was on one program along with Dr. Eben Alexander at Vail, Colorado Symposium. I would like to hear more about that. Nancy has been a strong proponent for bridging the gap between science and spirituality, which is something here in Dark Window we're very, very interested in. That's part of our motto. Known for her fun, lighthearted, kind of girl next door demeanor, Nancy loves teaching others on how to live a more purposeful, joyful, creative, and inspired life. So, Nancy, welcome to Dark Window. How are you doing tonight?
I am great. Thank you for having me on tonight.
Well, it's great having you. Of course, we've met before. I guess it's been 3 or 4 months.
Right.
We met after a MUFON meeting one night.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. And then we met again at a friend's house for a little get together and a chat.
That's right.
And that's when I decided I needed to talk to you on the radio. So
that was a great talk that night, by the way.
It was. Yeah. There was just like 6 or 7 of us sitting around a table, just open forum, talking with Nancy and talking with each other about matters of near-death experiences, high strangeness of all sorts. And Nancy, where do you live now? Are you down in Tucson? Or
I am. I'm on the north side of Tucson.
Okay. But you came from Colorado, didn't you? Came from the Denver area or something?
Yeah, the events that we're going to be talking about tonight all happened in the Boulder area, kind of north and west of Denver a little bit.
Yeah, I've seen some of your pictures. Now, to get our program started off here, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but we have to set the stage here. Can you briefly tell us what it was that you went through? What caused this near-death experience? And can you give it to us really? And I know this is hard. Can you just kind of outline it, sort of the Reader's Digest version?
I'll do my best. So this actually, the first NDE, which we're going to, really kind of prompted all of this stuff to happen, was about 8.5 years ago. And at that time, up until that time, I had been working for like 20 years in the sciences. And I had a degree in geology. I had worked as an archaeologist too. I had a minor in archaeology, and I worked as an archaeological artist on several different digs. So I was pretty well steeped in the sciences, and quite the skeptic. That's really where I got there over a long road. It wasn't just an overnight thing, but there's certainly during my college years I had become a skeptic. But in my mid 40s. I was in the Boulder, Colorado area and was out biking and got in an accident with a woman who was a distracted driver. And the accident is horrendous. I detail it in my book. We don't really need to, spend a lot of time on that. But I ended up in the hospital because I had broken a lot of bones. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that was in my spine and my neck. there's the scene of the accident right there. And because of all the trauma in my neck and back, they were really afraid I wasn't going to be able to walk again. I was pretty close to being a quadriplegic, actually. It was pretty dicey there for a minute. And so I was scheduled to go into surgery. And during surgery, a couple of days later, I died on the operating table and had this incredible near-death experience. I didn't know that's what it was at the time because I was an atheist. I didn't really believe in any of this stuff, but I couldn't really deny what had happened. And it was pretty profound for me. It did a complete reversal on my life. I mean, it just changed me overnight. That was the start of my journey from there on out. So that's kind of in a nutshell the first NDE. The second one happened a few years later when I was in the emergency room I had developed pneumonia, which was really weird because I had never really had it before that. But I had developed a really intense, quick onset form of pneumonia and ended up in the ER where I coded right there in the emergency room. And that one wasn't as huge and profound. It didn't last very long, but I was there was a lot of stuff that happened in there, which most people would go through, where I was floating near the ceiling of the emergency room and looking down at myself and having a conversation with, if you want to call it God, guess you can call it God. I don't really know for sure, but I was I was having a conversation with a big booming voice. So I'm assuming, that's probably what it was. And I got the chance at that point to make a decision whether I was going to come back or not. My first NDE, I really didn't have that decision point, and so I came back. The second one, I had the ability to decide, and so then I decided, yes, I would come back and continue on. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. But coming from someone who was, I was a geologist, so I was really into stuff, like right. Reality is only like rocks and metal and things that I can measure and touch. But that, especially that first experience, really opened my heart, it opened up my mind, and it opened me up to being a lot more curious about the nature of this reality that we're in.
Well, that's one of the amazing things about your NDE is that you had no preconceived religious notions or life after death things going on inside your head to begin with. You were a scientist.
Right.
You were completely, give me the empirical data. Show me the rocks. Show me the bones. Which I think is fascinating because the change in you now is so profound. And I think it happens to a lot of NDE people. Now, isn't it safe to say that a near-death experience is beyond anything the vast majority of humans have ever experienced?
I think the majority of humans alive right now probably haven't experienced one. I think we don't really know for sure how many people experience one form of near-death experience or another. People have varying, it's kind of on a scale, like not everybody experiences exactly the same amount of stuff.
Sure.
But it's maybe at most 10%. But I've been in places where I wouldn't expect people to be talking about NDEs and have overheard just people saying, yeah, my husband died last year on the operating table when they were working on his heart. He had one of those NDE things. So I think it's a little bit more common than maybe a lot of people want to talk. Well, a lot of people don't want to talk about it, but it's not an everyday occurrence either. It's not everybody is, going into surgery and coding like I did. But it's profound.
It is. I mean, it's really, if you think about it, it's rather contrary to a lot of the teachings of various religious faiths throughout the world.
Yeah.
I mean, they have to, like, and I don't want to get in trouble here, okay?
I
But
don't either.
this is a hard thing to talk about. Um, but let's say that you're not being resurrected from the dead. You never really experienced death, okay? You just went from one state to another.
Mm-hmm.
You went from basically a three-dimensional world into another dimension. Um, what was the most transformative part? I mean, maybe we've already touched on this, but what would you say is the most transformative part of your near-death experience, Nancy?
There were a couple, and each point was a little bit different. During the accident itself, I had like the first inklings that something wasn't, in reality, something wasn't the way that I thought it was. I was propelled, my consciousness, my soul consciousness is what I call it, was propelled out of my body and viewing the accident from outside of what was going on. But I also had a form of my own consciousness still in my body. So I was experiencing the accident from two different vantage points
Oh,
at
really?
once.
No, I didn't understand. Okay. I wasn't
Yeah.
aware. I guess I missed that part because I read part of your book and I watched some programs on YouTube and talked to you. So you were in two places at once.
Right. Yeah, that was during the accident itself. And that was kind of freaking me out.
I guess so.
From a materialist scientist perspective, that kind of thing doesn't happen. Consciousness is stuck in your head. So you shouldn't be able to view an accident like that from a vantage point 75 feet away and see stuff that you couldn't see from in your body. That was the thing that convinced me it was real. I was getting a vantage point that I could not have perceived from inside my body. It was wider. I got to see more stuff going on.
Could you make yourself go back and forth to your body back? No, you couldn't do that.
No, it was two very different states of consciousness. The human me, the human Nancy, who was still in my body, was very fearful, as you could imagine. It was a really traumatic accident, and it lasted a long time. It wasn't like being hit and done. I was dragged under a vehicle for quite a long time, and so I was in that state of dual places for a long time. And
it's kind of hard to wrap your head around it unless you've actually experienced it.
It's weird.
I know. Sounds weird.
And that I remember after the accident, I'm laying there waiting for the paramedics to come, and I'm thinking about what just happened. And I thought, I just got the inkling that something isn't the way that I thought it was about this thing we call reality, but I don't have time to worry about it right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was the first.
Yeah, it changed your life. Your whole approach to life.
Yeah.
Where did you go internally after that? I mean, how did it change your approach to life?
Right away, it was a little bewildering at first. After I came back from the surgery where I was, that was the big near-death experience. It was really weird because even right away, my personality was already starting to shift. Like I was super peaceful, and friends that had known me for years would come in to visit me, in the hospital, and they're like, "You're really different. You're really like serene and calm and cool. And what is going on? This isn't normal for you." I used to be fairly anxious and kind of not really hyper, but I guess I could be considered hyper. I was pretty active and chatty.
Well, you were a bike rider, and did you go jogging and running and things like that? Or
I was pretty active outdoors. So yeah,
okay.
I was going all the time. But I was super serene after that. And like, like I had taken multiple chill pills, one after another. And that was the first, like, I came back pretty cool and calm for the most part. I had a couple of freak out moments when I started to think about what had happened. But then, as time went on, I realized something within about 3 months of this accident having happened, that it was a huge gift. But I was at a turning point in that first 3 months. Like, I could either completely deny it and go back to the way I was, as an atheist, and just say, I don't want to look there, la la la. I don't want to see that. It's nothing. It's not real. Or, and this is the way that I felt I needed to go, I could embrace everything that I was taught during that experience, which was a lot. I was taught a lot of stuff during that NDE.
Let me break in here for a minute.
Yeah.
How long of a span of time do you think you were in this experience?
That's another one of those weird questions, because time doesn't work the same. Here
Right.
we have, a passage of time.
Linear time.
Yeah, and it flows like a river. In that state of consciousness, outside of physical, it's more like a frozen lake. So time doesn't really pass the way that we experience it here. So on our, on the purely physical plane, I was out, and the doctors aren't really, they know how long I was coded. I was coding for about 2 minutes, but one of them admitted, well, we've seen this kind of thing happen before, and it could be that your soul was out of body for the entire surgery, which was 2 hours. So from a physical perspective, it was somewhere in there. The doc was thinking it was really closer to the whole 2 hour window that I was gone of, the surgery. From my perspective, in the NDE itself, granted, I didn't feel time passing, but the amount of stuff that I was taught, the amount of things I did and saw, if I were to equate it to time here, it would take like 2 or 3 months of time here. So for me, it felt like a few months. I call it my semester in heaven, or my semester in the afterlife, because that's about what it felt like.
Speaking of the doctors, actually, what does the medical profession, where are they at with this? And in your case, what does the medical establishment or even science, how do they view this? I mean, you've certainly been in those conversations now.
There's a huge gulf right now in the sciences and in the medical profession. And I think I helped stir the pot a little bit, even though I don't necessarily mean to. And people like Eben Alexander do too. There are, if you talk to doctors, a lot of doctors behind closed doors where they're not on camera, where they're not going to be recorded.
I know where you're going with this.
They will tell you all of these amazing stories. Mm-hmm. But if you put them on the record, it doesn't exist.
Right.
Because they, rightfully so, right now the medical profession discourages doctors and nurses from talking about these types of experiences. Now, the nurses will be a lot more talkative than the docs will. They don't have their license on the line necessarily. So they're like, yeah, we see this stuff all the time. Maybe not as extensive as yours, but shoot, it happens at least on a weekly basis in the hospital.
No kidding. Yeah.
Officially though, we don't want to go there. Because they can't measure it. It's really hard to study. There are some physicians who are actually trying to study it. We've got a few, and I'm totally blanking on their names right now, but which, bothers me because I should know them. But there are several that are working on it from a medical research perspective. And one at New York, I think he's at New York University. Pim Van Lommel is one who's working on this. I think he's a cardiologist. But a lot of people are starting to look at this really seriously. But again, if you, like, I talked to my doctor afterward, kind of off the record, he's like, I see this stuff happening all the time. It's totally real. Don't worry about it. You're right on track. And of course, the chaplains in the hospital will be the first to say, yes, it happens. It's real. We talk to patients about this all the time. So there's a real divide right now, at least in the medical professions, about what's going on. I think it's really hard for a lot of folks to swallow, though, because again, how do you measure it? What does it mean? And some people might even be afraid that it's going to completely overturn everything they thought they knew about reality, which it probably will.
Probably would.
But really what it's doing is this is the way I look at it. It's not overturning, it's just opening us up. So we might have, right now we've got this really small view of what reality is. And these experiences, not just NDEs, but other stuff too, really opens us up, or it should be opening us up to be more curious about like the whole gamut of reality. What is reality in truth? It isn't just this little thing that we can touch and measure here in 3D. It's all this other stuff too. And that we're on the brink of going there. We're like starting to dip our toes in that big ocean.
Yeah, I think we're starting to expand our minds a little bit and realize that what we've assumed was reality for the last few thousands of years, we're starting to understand that we don't have the full picture here.
Yeah.
And I think science is starting to realize that. Real briefly, and I don't want to get too deep into this because number one, we don't have the time. And number two, you've got some books out there that folks, I tell you, you really need to read up on Nancy. She's an incredible person, and her experience was extremely incredible. But Nancy, what can you just kind of tell us about, real briefly, what you went through during that altered time? I mean, you met someone, you went here, you went there, you did this, you did that. Can you just kind of touch on a few of the things that you did while you were in your death, like when you were dead?
When I was dead, I'm actually pretty lighthearted about it now. I don't like to get all doom and gloom because, for me, it isn't. For me, it was an amazingly positive experience, although it might not sound like that to someone from the outside.
So it didn't scare you?
No. In fact, I had a really, honest to God, I was terrified of death before this. I mean, I was shaking, terrified to even think about death. It was that bad. It was, I couldn't think about it. I would stay up all night, some nights, just shaking in terror at the thought of it. That's how bad I was.
But and now some of the things that you've experienced,
I'm like, not a big deal anymore.
Give us a little taste of what you experienced out there.
Yeah. So when I first woke up, I didn't go through the tunnel. Some people do, some people don't. I just woke up over there, wherever there was. And I came to realize later that there was kind of a holding area. It wasn't the full-on afterlife or whatever the afterlife is. It was sort of an in-between state where people sort of come down and decompress from physical life. So I woke up there and I'm looking around, and it's beautiful. It's this beautiful landscape of low mountains, almost like the Appalachians or even like Scotland. It looked to me more like the Highlands in Scotland. And some of my Scottish friends are always, they're always cool about that. But that's sort of what it looked like, was those rolling hills, rolling mountains with a meadow and stuff. But when I was there, initially, I'm like, what the heck is this? I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be on the operating table. And I started feeling stuff right away. Like I felt love coming through me and welcoming and peace. But it was an energy that I felt, not a voice. It was this, almost like standing in front of a fireplace, feeling the heat, come through you. That's what this love felt like. And I remember thinking, well, wait a minute. After a long time, I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, I'm completely analyzing the whole time I'm there. And I'm thinking, well, I wonder if I died on the operating table, because this is not a hallucination. It didn't feel like one. It felt so real, and it seemed so real. And I thought, well, wait a minute. Did I die on the operating table? That was my first thought. And then I thought, wait a minute. If I did, why am I here? Because my parents told me I was going to go to hell because I was an atheist. And this certainly didn't feel like hell, not the welcoming,
Right, yeah.
not the love and everything else. So I expected it to be a lot hotter than what I was experiencing.
Yeah, well, that's a good point.
And but then I heard a voice, a welcoming voice, which basically said something like, this is your home. Welcome home. This is where you belong. You're a part of us. You're a part of me. Welcome home. And then I remembered. And that memory of having been there before this life here was just boom, right there. It was powerful. I was in it. And then quickly after that, a figure that looked like a woman came up to me, and she told me she was going to be my teacher and my guide for the next little bit, to teach me what I needed to know in order to go back to my life on earth and make it one that would be worth living. Like, I was supposed to go back and improve my life, be a better person, clean up my messes and as much as I could, and just come back and be a good person. And so she took me to different areas. At first I balked at that. Like, I didn't want to come back here after I was there for a little while. I didn't want to come back to physical reality. But I kind of I rolled with it. There's a lot more in this story, but I'm kind of hitting the highlights here.
Yeah, just that's good. I mean,
and so she took me to what looked like different places in this landscape, and taught me different things. The first one of the early ones that she brought me to was this little pond up in the mountain. It looked like it was in the mountains, and at the side of the pond, she told me to kneel down and touch the surface of the pond and see what happened. And I was kind of getting, not really cranky, but I was kind of a wise ass at that point, which I probably shouldn't have been, but that's me. And I was a little irreverent, but I said, well, I know what's going to happen if I touch the surface. It's going to cause ripples. And she's like, just do it. Just, for once, listen to me and just do it. So I did it. And of course, ripples came out from where I touched the pond. And she used that as a teaching opportunity. It was, the first part of that teaching was, this is how your actions, your words and your actions, and even your thoughts on earth affect the world around you. They go out from you as ripples on a pond would, and they touch other people as they, expand out from you. And just from a practical perspective, that makes sense. Sure. But it made me much more aware of my interactions with people here in this life. The second part of that teaching was my life review. Now, at the time, I had no idea what a life review was. I didn't know the terminology for it. I had no idea what was happening. But she showed me like little YouTube, they look like little YouTube videos on the surface of this pond. And I could focus on these little individual videos and see that they were specific times in my life. Things were, I may have done something to help someone else, or they were an incident maybe where I said something to hurt someone else, so you get to see these little points in your life and kind of review them, evaluate how you acted, evaluate your effects on other people. But the real kicker for me on this was, not only did I get to see it from like a little video, but I got to experience it as well. So as soon as I focused on one of these incidents, I was back in it, just as if it was happening right now.
Really?
And I was experiencing it not only from my perspective as Nancy, but I was also experiencing it at the same time from the perspective of the other person I was interacting with. So if it was like, say, for example, there was an incident where, and I talk about this a lot, my sister's cool with it, but there was an incident when I was in my late teens where I had said something very intentionally to hurt my younger sister. It was just mean. It was mean-spirited. It was stupid, but it really hurt her profoundly. And I didn't know at the time how profoundly that hurt her. So in my review of that one particular incident, I got to experience me saying whatever it was to her. But then I was inside of her as she was feeling that hurt. So I was feeling her hurt right along with her, and her sense of betrayal. And, oh my God, I thought I was safe with you, but I'm not. You're just nasty, and you're out to hurt me. And that was life altering right there, to be able to experience someone else's pain.
You could actually enter into the feelings of the person that is like ultimately empathic.
Oh yeah.
It's so we're not talking judgment, and we're talking lessons learned here.
Right. Yeah. And
Wow.
and I went immediately, as most people do, you immediately go into being ashamed of yourself. That's the typical reaction, like, oh my God, I feel so horrible about that. And my teacher said, that is not what we want here.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. She said, we don't want you to wallow in shame over this.
Okay.
We want you to learn from this and go back and change things for the better for yourself and your family. We want you to take this as a lesson to become a better person.
So
that's what
it's not judgment. It's just a lesson. And
right.
You get to feel it. You get to feel what the other person felt.
It's actually probably more transformative that way than somebody just judging you. So it's harder.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, so you went through all of this.
Yeah.
And then you came back.
Yeah.
How did you cope with that?
That was hard at first. Just immediately when I woke up in the recovery room, I was not a happy camper for being here. I think I told you I woke up screaming like a 2-year-old throwing a temper tantrum. It was not pretty because I missed being there with my teacher, with my peeps, Mm-hmm. That was my home. And what the heck was I doing back here? Now that subsided pretty quickly. And then I was into this whole, the post near-death experience, peace and love phase we all go through. It's like, oh, everything's great. But then, after at that 3-month mark afterwards, that's kind of when you're starting to really get back into, for me, it was recovering from the accident itself, all the trauma to my body. And that's when I really got to start to process all of life here. And that's when it got really hard. When I saw all of the violence again and re-experience that from this other perspective, like, oh my gosh, it's really hard to live here. Why in the world did I come back? This is not easy. And just the simple things of like, you mean I have to wash my clothes now and make dinner and, cook? Let's just that's
physical realities.
Yeah, you gotta earn a living or, make the rent or the mortgage payment and all that piddly little stuff that now it felt like, why do I have to do all that stuff? That wasn't a thing during my NDE. We didn't have to worry about paying the mortgage. But just the other part of it too was a lot of us have this, we have a post near-death experience high, and then we sort of crash. And that's pretty typical. A lot of people don't talk about this because we want it to sound all great stuff, but there usually is a little bit of a downside for a while, where we're trying to get reincorporated into all of this stuff that's
You
happening
mean
in
kind
the
of like
world.
a PTSD or something?
Yeah, and just in looking around, and it's not PTSD from the NDE potentially, it's really about looking around here and thinking, we don't have to be living this way. Why are we so
Oh, yeah.
nasty to each other? This is hard. I don't, and you come back here wanting everybody to be loving to each other and beautiful. And because I can see it, when I look at people then and now, then in that, even that 3-month period afterward, I can see all the good stuff in people. And it was really hard for me at first to wonder, like, go into this whole state of like, why are we being so nasty to each other just globally, not in an individual basis, but there are some really amazing people, but a lot of stuff is not great right now. That was really hard. And being one of these people who wants to change it, but I felt powerless to change it. That was hard too.
I bet.
Um,
What are some of
yeah.
I have a question here. What are some of the other types of extraordinary experiences, and what can they teach us about who we are and the nature of reality?
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot of question right there.
Yeah, that's an entire talk in and of itself, but we can just kind of mention, some of these other experiences. People have shared death experiences, which it's similar to an NDE, but it's when, let's say when I had one of these with my father when he passed away, and he was in the last stages of life and died. And I could experience, because I was close to him,
Yeah.
I experienced little bits and pieces of what he was experiencing as he was in his process of really truly dying. He did not come back. He was terminally ill for real. And I got to experience things like the music of heaven, which again is like completely otherworldly. I can't even describe it. It's amazing. But I experienced that. I didn't know what it was at the time. But that's called a shared death experience, where a loved one or a family member or a friend who is with someone who is dying can experience bits and pieces of that transition of that other person. So that's one.
Mm-hmm.
Another one is I think it's called terminal lucidity. And my doctor talked to me about this. He's seen this a lot. And it's where usually it's someone who's very elderly, who has had dementia, and usually severe dementia, whose brain really isn't functioning well enough to even speak at the time that they're passing, will all of a sudden wake up, have full consciousness, remember everyone, which they hadn't been doing for like a year or two before. They'll all of a sudden be able to communicate as if nothing has happened. They'll remember everybody, and they'll say their last goodbyes, and then they die. And that's called terminal lucidity. And it creeps people out because they know, like, wait a minute, my mother or grandmother didn't recognize me for 5 years, and she couldn't speak for 2. But now all of a sudden she can speak, and she remembers everybody, and she's saying her final goodbyes. So that's another one. There's an author, Maggie Callanan, has written a lot about that, and it's really a fascinating topic. Then there's the Kundalini experiences, where it's sort of like having an NDE without actually
What'd you
having
call that?
Kundalini. Kundalini experience. It's experiencing that divine love without having a medical challenge. So you're not dead, you're fully alive, but you have a lot of those other effects that I would have as an NDEer. So that's called usually a Kundalini experience or spontaneous awakening. So those are a few that people can experience. There's a bunch of more, but those are some of the main ones that we talk about. And I think what they're pointing to all of those things, out of body experiences too, remote viewing, all that stuff, really starts to point to the fact that, first of all, we are much more than we imagine in this human form. We are literally spiritually based beings. And this is a temporary existence that we have. Our consciousness, our full-on eternal consciousness, is not produced by this. We may have a human level of consciousness that is produced in the brain. I won't argue that. But then there is that eternal, what some call the soul, I call it the soul, that soul level of consciousness that we also all have. And that is more expansive than just this physical body. And that's why we have these experiences. We're able to have these experiences that go out of body, to have this terminal lucidity, to have these NDEs or these kundalinis. It tells us that we are much more than we think we are in this physical state. And it's starting to point to the fact that physical reality isn't all there is.
Do you think these near-death experiences have been happening to people down through the millennium, down through thousands of years, and it's just not been recorded, or it's been recorded differently? I mean, I don't think near-death experiences would be something that's just happening in the 21st century.
No, I think they've been around for a long time. I would expect Lazarus to have had an NDE.
Yeah, I would bet.
If we could talk to him. I think the thing with today is medical science is so good that we can bring back a lot more people than we used to be able to. But if you look back through history, you start to get these little inklings of people who have had extraordinary experiences. I think it's, the Apostle Paul on the road to Damascus is one, where that he had kind of an awakening there.
He was blinded by the light or something.
Right.
Yeah.
You just need to look with a slightly different eye. They're not going to call it an NDE because that's a modern term, right? That's something that Raymond Moody coined, 40 years ago.
Oh, that's
but
right.
You have to really look and just be open to some of these other experiences.
Yeah, well, we're kind of rolling up on, this hour goes by so quick.
It does.
Nancy, after everything that you've been through, the transformation that you yourself, even you talk about, you went from this person to this person almost. What can you give the listeners as far as tips and things that they can cultivate so that there's more peace and awareness in their lives?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's a lot of things that we can do. Some of the easiest ones are just to have, first of all, to be open to the idea that you are more than just this physical body. That's really important. The second one is to have some kind of a quiet mind practice. That could be meditation, it could be prayer, it could be contemplation or journaling or something. Just start to get into the habit of quieting your mind in some way every day. And that'll really help kind of put you on the path to becoming more aware and conscious in the moment. And just be open to other methodologies too. I teach people different forms of meditation and prayer to get them to that peaceful, centered state. But it does take work. It's not an overnight thing. Even for me, it took me a while. But just some kind of contemplative practice or quiet mind practice really does help at first.
Well, the meditation thing, do you meditate?
I do, yeah.
You know where you're going now.
I do.
I've meditated on and off throughout my life, of course. And I've had some very good meditations, but when you sit and quiet yourself and you pull yourself in, where you're going. You've been to an alternate dimension, mm-hmm. a non-physical. How do you explain stuff like that to people? I mean, is there a way to get people to understand what a non-physical dimension is like?
It's really hard.
I can imagine.
It is really hard. It's sort of like, those once in a while, we all have these super vivid either dreams or visions or something that happened to us, during our quiet state. We might get in actually Mozart used to go into a bit of an altered state when he was riding from city to city in one of those carriages. And that's really what we need to get into, is that somewhat disconnected state from physical reality. And that's really hard. It's really hard to describe what that is, but when you're in that state, you kind of connect to that other layer of reality, that other dimension.
Well, Nancy, the last 5 minutes or so, let's talk a little bit about your artwork.
Okay.
Now, there's a website that Nancy is an artist, folks, and she's a very good artist, by the way. Were you an artist before your near-death experience?
Yeah, I was kind of a dabbler. I had gone to art school, but I wasn't doing what I'm, anywhere near to the level I'm doing after the experience. Yeah. So, yeah, it's the artwork has evolved quite a bit, and I got, after the NDE, I got really fascinated with just intuition and energy and life itself. I just got really kind of overjoyed about life again. And I started painting animals, big animals. And so that's kind of what I work on right now. But I'm also starting to get back into big landscapes, and landscapes they're sort of like a layer of this otherworldliness added on to them. So it isn't just your typical landscape.
I've seen some of your paintings. I went on your website. Patricia, can you put those websites up there so we can have a look?
Thank you.
Nancy, when you tell us the difference between those two websites there?
Yeah, the top one, nancyrynes.com, is for all of my books and my speaking and my spiritual classes and all that. All the stuff related to my NDE is at nancyrynes.com. And then my artwork is a completely different site. I separated it because it's just easier for me to maintain. And that's nancyrynesstudio.com. They are linked, so if you end up on one, you can get to the other, but they are separate content.
Now, Nancy, what do you have on your schedule? Are you speaking anywhere? Are you still are you out talking at conferences, and do you have anything going on?
I am sort of taking this year off from conferences. I sort of got burned out on that. So this year I'm doing my own stuff. I've got once a month, I do an online event where I call it my Soul Talk Masterclass. And that's every month. It's a different topic. They don't build on each other. They're all independent. They're standalone talks. And we talk about stuff like past lives, energy. We've got one coming up about ancient sacred places, which is like one of my personal all-time favorite topics.
Yeah, I'm very into that topic too.
And we're going to talk about some sites here in Arizona. I'm going to take people on a little tour. I'll video a tour of a couple of sites so people can understand what that's like. And so that's one coming up, and we're going to do a talk on the energy around money. And so a lot of stuff like that is on my Soul Talk Masterclass series. That's on my nancyrynes.com website. And then I've got a workshop that I'm doing in the Denver area coming up at the end of September. So I don't know what that's going to look like as far as timing of the release of.
Now, where's that being held, or is that right?
That's going to be held in Castle Rock, Colorado, which is just south of Denver.
Oh, okay.
So that's an in-person workshop, and that'll be my first one in a long time that I'll be doing in person. So I'm excited about that one. It's about connecting to the spirit realm and connecting to our guides and our guidance, and that's what that's all about. Just giving people ways that they can do it. And then I've got some other bigger kind of interviews coming up this autumn. So I can't talk about them yet, but but stay tuned for that on my website if you're interested.
Now, does everyone have a spirit guide, do you think?
Yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much.
We just don't normally all listen to them.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being on your show.
Yes. Do you meet a lot with other near-death experience folks, or are you just out there on your own, or do you guys keep in touch? Do you talk?
Yeah, we do. We do conferences together. I'm not going to be going to the conference this year in Salt Lake, but we do usually meet up every year at a conference. And I keep in touch with Eben Alexander and Karen Newell, who are friends of mine, and kind of keep tabs on what they're doing. I've also belonged to a little group of just spiritual authors who are very well known within their own areas of expertise. And so I connect with other authors in this arena as well, just not necessarily other NDEers. So I just kind of get my feelers out and talk to people as I can.
So now your newest book, is Awakenings from the Light. Is that your newest book?
That's my first one.
Oh, your first book.
Yeah, Awakenings from the Light is the first one. That's the one on the yellow cover, the golden cover. And that details that big NDE, that first one. It's super detailed. It tells about all of the things that I learned. So that's all in that first book, Awakenings from the Light. Walking in the Light is I had a lot of people that wanted to know, how did you, after your NDE, how did you integrate all of those lessons that you learned into your life? What was the process that you went through to bring all that wisdom into your life? That process is in the book, Walking in the Light. That's the woman with her hands up with the pink flowers. Yeah. That details the process that I went through for myself in order to kind of bring those lessons into my life.
And that picture of you there in the middle, you said that was a picture taken not long after you were out of surgeries and you were back on your feet. And
yeah, that was 4 weeks post-surgery, if you can believe it. That was one thing we didn't touch on is I had an incredible healing after that. I had all of my casts. You can see I didn't have any casts on.
Yeah, I noticed
that. But I had been in casts for 4 weeks, and then I went to the doctors for my 4-week checkup, and they said, well, you don't need these anymore, so we're taking them all off.
That's amazing, because you got hit by an SUV, right? And you got drug underneath that SUV for 60 or 70 feet.
Right. And I had multiple, over 100 different bone fractures. And within 4 weeks, that's what I was completely out of my cast. So there you go.
One very amazing individual, folks. Nancy Rynes. Nancy Rynes. Rynes. What is the proper way? Either way.
Well, I can't speak it in Czech, but it's Rynes in English.
Rynes. Nancy Rynes. Okay. So it's nancyrynes.com. It's nancyrynesstudio.com. And so thank you for joining us, everyone, tonight. So along with my guest, Nancy Rynes, I'm your host, Jim Mann, along with my program manager behind the scene, who's been popping up the pictures, Patricia Wilkinson. Please join us next week for another engaging conversation with shedding a little bit of light into the dark window. Thank you, Nancy, and good night.
Thank you.